Thank you very much. I'm so glad to be here and kind of returning a favor because our organization is 14 years old, but when in our very early days, one of our local foundations gave us money to go to New York and Boston to see how things were done by grown-ups. So we came here and we had a wonderful welcome. I think it was Justine Liff was the Parks Commissioner then, and we met Don King and also Gene Servillo and brought both of them back to Pittsburgh to talk actually about park rangers and park maintenance. So just know that your fame has reached Pittsburgh and we have park ranger envy. And I wanted to say that I'm also happy to be home because, and I'm laughing home because when I've come back for vacation with my husband, we'll be in the middle of a giant traffic jam and I'll say, it's so nice to be home. And he looks at me like I'm crazy. But actually, Jamaica Pond and the Arnold Arboretum, the Public Garden, Boston Common, and Castle Island were really important pleasure places for me as a child. I spent really a long time hanging out with my dad and our dog in all of them. So I think parks stay with you for a long time. I wanted to start by saying I have a few suggestions for hard times, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy in Pittsburgh before I make my suggestions. Our organization is focused on 4 parks. First, for the first 10 years of our life, we worked on these 4, which are about 80% of the parkland in the city. We have about 2,200 acres. And this was at the request of our mayor. And then our new mayor has asked us to work more places. So we actually have 171 parks, but we're now working in about 15 of them. And we're a nonprofit partner to the city, and we raise all our own operating money. And there are 2 things that are very different about Pittsburgh from here. One is good, which is that we have an Allegheny County Regional Asset District, and there's about $4.5 million of dedicated funding that goes into the parks, city parks from that district, and there's more that goes into the county parks, so that's great. But the bad thing for us is we don't have a unified parks department. So we have the maintenance done by the DPW and some of the programming and other things done by the Department of Parks and Rec. But they're really more about events and facilities, and so nobody structurally has the ability to lead. We started off working on capital projects, but we have wound up doing a little bit of everything. So we do everything the city does, but backwards and in high heels. And we've raised about $50 million. We're not quite there yet, but we'll be 15 next year, and that's our goal. So I'm going to quickly flick through a couple of projects that we've done. An entrance to Frick Park, which was our first project, and we thought entrances were very emblematic and we should do them. This is in Shenley Park. It's a cafe and visitor center. It was boarded up and closed for 10 years because it had been a drain on the city budget because they had a naturalist staffing it, and so they just closed it to save that money. So it's actually a financial success, but in a modest way, in the sense that we have a concessionaire who pays us a small rent, but that's enough to cover our maintenance costs on the building and the grounds. And so it's sort of a wash, but that's kind of a win because now it's a park facility for people. We've done a stream, put the stream back in its channel and put the trail back, and that was, all of our things are pretty much partnerships with the city, so we provided a lot of materials and the city provided a lot of labor. A theme we found when we started was that we had a lot of fountains and they were all being used as planters. As you can kind of see in the upper slide, those are all the bushes in the fountain and reflecting pool, and it took a while, but we brought that garden back. This building was going to be torn down because it had termites, and it's a historic picnic shelter in one of the parks, so we restored that. And then Dan Biederman was actually a consultant to us on this project, but that parking lot in the upper slide was park land for 100 years, and when we did a master plan, people were outraged to find that it actually had been turned into a parking lot. They thought it was the University of Pittsburgh's lot. So when we all found out it was park, people said, we want that back. So finally, it took a while, but there it is, and it's called Shenley Plaza. So here's my ideas. Really important to develop, if you're going to go get corporate sponsorships, to develop a framework for them. Is it permanent or temporary? How much money will you get? What's the visual impact? And I guess the way I would decide all these things is you need to preserve the user's experience. So you might have a different standard for what's in the woods than you would for what's in a very urban kind of space. But I think it's really good to have standards that hopefully are written down and that you can use as decision points. This is in Venice. And I thought that was kind of an interesting example. Apparently the Palazzo Ducale is falling down, so they got $2 million for this advertising. And I guess it's temporary, but you know, it's a question that one would ask oneself. Is that, certainly has visual impact, but maybe it's worth it to save the building. In Shenley Plaza, we actually did get some corporate sponsorships, and I'll talk about one of them. Let's see, this is a carousel. And you can see the big white tent. Well, to the right of it is where the carousel is. And our local financial institution, PNC, gave us all the money for this carousel and a maintenance fund. So in exchange, we call it the PNC Carousel, and we etched their name and logo, or their logo, I guess, up in the little medallions of glass. And I guess I feel perfectly comfortable with this because it's such a low visual impact, but you know, maybe not everybody would agree with that. But I don't think we would have necessarily had a carousel without some opportunity for recognition. And then events, I think, are great because they really have no permanent impact on the park. So we have a very successful, and I guess you have a luncheon here too, but we have a Spring Hat Luncheon that's raised a lot of money for us, and we put up a lot of signage with logos, but of course they're gone the next day. And the advantage of that is that we get about 700 people coming to the park and they wouldn't otherwise come. And that's one of our chief means of getting operating support, is the net money from this event. Involving the public, the more I go on this, the more I think that's super important. And Tony already talked about why parks are important, but I think it's important to think about cities investing in their parks. I went to a speech just a few weeks ago, and John Crompton from Texas A&M said this, and I thought it was right. A park system is perceived to be a relatively discretionary, non-essential government service. It's nice to have if it can be afforded. And I think that we really need to change our language and change the way we frame what we're saying. I think parks were viewed, or the Parks and Rec field often would call itself in the olden days the leisure profession. And you know, who has leisure? The times have changed. Nobody has leisure time, so then why would you ever fund that? In my opinion, the challenge is not financial, really, it's political. If you can get enough people excuse me, mobilized to say that something is really important, I wouldn't mind a water. I think that you can mobilize people into a force for change. Something we developed for one of our projects. We have the dysfunctional cycle, and then the next slide is the functional one. But you can see if the parks, and I think that it's more than just getting people involved, it's also getting money into the capital plant, because if the park looks terrible, no one will go there. And if nobody goes there, they don't have a good experience. And then why would they care, and why would anyone care? On the other hand, if you can raise some money and improve the park, periodic capital improvements there, the yellow arrow, then people go, they love it, they bring their children, and it's a very positive benefit. And then what you wind up with in the end is you have so many, thank you, you have so many supporters that it creates a lot of pressure on elected officials to do something. Thank you, this is great. Get all worked up over parks. So one of the things that we have chosen to do is to have a good volunteer program. We have 100 urban eco-stewards who currently care for about 65 acres of parkland. And when we came along 14 years ago, the city workforce was really mowing and doing trash pickup. So this is mostly all ecological restoration in the woods, and we've never had a grievance. So it seems to work out. Nobody's lost their job because of this. It's just that we're taking care of parts of the park that were neglected. Direct mail is another good thing that we do. We view it as having multiple benefits because it really keeps our message in touch with people. And then we average $125,000 a year in net money from it, which is good. And Pittsburgh's not a big place. We had 750,000 people in 1950, and we have 320,000 today. We send out a newsletter, which is important because our population is older, so they relate to not internet stuff, and it gets our story out, and we spend a lot of time making sure that this is a good product. But then we also don't want to sacrifice the future. So we have a person whose job it is to focus on social media, and our blog visits have really spiked. We're very happy with this. We're also on Twitter and Facebook and all of that. I don't do that, but she does. And our online giving is not very big in dollars. Last year we raised total about $40,000 in online giving. But we know for a fact that there are many people, 20-somethings, who might be generous but will only give if they can do it online. So we think this is the wave of the future. And all those spikes are related to specific e-messages that we put out about some reason that people needed to give. So we're tracking it very closely, and we think it has a good future. Get them while they're young. I think that's really important. So we've done a lot of different things. I won't tell you all of them, but in partnership with the Museum of Natural History, we did 4 separate events over a 5-year period where we cataloged the biodiversity in our parks and had a lot of public involvement. We have high school urban eco-stewards with 5 different schools, and we're trying to expand it to be with the whole public school system. And this was a little bit of what I was saying earlier. Properly positioning the parks, I think, is absolutely where we have to go. Instead of giving the impression that we're somehow a discretionary service, I think we have to really tie ourselves to an important social cause and say, you need to invest in us because we're about economic development and quality of life. Or conversely, if you have giant swaths of horrible parkland in a city, what message does that give? What's that going to do for your economic development? And then in terms of health, which is really on everybody's mind for the reasons Tony outlined, an obesity epidemic and everything, we were very successful in getting UPMC Health Plan to fund this. This is the art for a billboard, but it's a campaign where we put in a website, parksarefree.com, and it has a combined calendar of events of ours and the cities of everything, all the free events that are going on, or all the events that are going on, but they're 90%, 99% free in the parks. And they backed it up with a print, outdoor, television, online, and radio advertising campaign. And we finished 2 years of a 3-year commitment, and they're actually really interested in even maybe doing something more impressive after this. So that's great. That's the screenshot of our website where, since we're now getting to be really politically savvy, that's our mayor up there with me. And that's the head of the health plan over there. And there's the website. And the other thing is never give up. I certainly think that we all have had terrible moments in doing this work, but it's really important to keep on. And I think what it does is create a lot of value for those who come after us.